Alright, so in this video I hope to make some sort of helpful installation guide for anybody who's trying to install an OEM gauge pack into a Subaru Impreza. I've got the 1999 model, but it's also compatible with all first-gen Imprezas, I believe. At least any of them with the modern ECU. I'm not entirely sure how to tell the difference between that, but hopefully this will give you a bit of information, sort of let you see what I've had to do to get this set up. So, I found, you'll see underneath that radio there in the double din, I've got the actual gauge pack itself. So let me go ahead and zoom in here and let you see what it looks like. So, focus. So there's the regular old cassette deck on top. Underneath is the OEM gauge pack, which I had to buy from eBay. It came with a thermocouple. Now what this does, the gauge pack, it actually, you probably already know this if you're watching this video, but basically it has a compass in it. It has outside temperature sensor, and also, what is the last thing? Barometer and altimeter. So it has a few cool features that were sort of from the, pre-GPS times. But basically, you can see what I've done here. You may not need to disassemble the dash so much to get to these components. But basically, you've got the cassette deck on top, the thing underneath. There are two wires that you need. There's one that adapts the power that goes from the car's wiring harness into the stereo. They basically add a bypass for that, so it can also power this thing. Let me show you what that looks like. It's partially wired into the car's harness right now, because I just got finished doing the hard part for me, which was locating the speed sense cable that goes from the ECU to, I believe, probably it goes down to the ODB2 plug right there. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll just show you what I've had to do. So, if this is 2018, I got this part from a Subaru dealer, if you could believe that. They've actually got this cable in stock, and they had one in stock near me. So that's good. Sorry for the heavy breathing. I spent like an hour underneath here trying to find the right cable, and I finally was able to do it by looking on some really obscure, like, an archive chat with some help person. So I want to make sure that you can see this as well. You got the wiring harness that goes between the car's harness that normally would power the stereo, so that's a female adapter that the power for the stereo goes into. Focus, you piece. It sort of extends out and then goes to this one, which actually is where you plug into the stereo, but it also branches out into this adapter, this sort of funky shaped one, which is actually what powers the gauge pack itself. So, and branching off of that, you get this cable, which goes up to the thermocouple. It's small. It's got only 2 connections on it. And then you get this blue wire, the lone blue wire. The blue wire is speed sense. So that basically plays a little animation on the gauge pack when you're moving, which is kind of cool.
As usual, my explanation is kind of a mess, so the point I try to get here is more or less that the gauge pack uses several of its sensors in conjunction to determine whether or not the compass is properly calibrated. When it isn't calibrated correctly, the vehicle icon flashes. I would guess that the compass sensor, the vehicle speed, and whatever you've set the magnetic declination to be are the inputs that it uses to determine if the compass is calibrated incorrectly or not. For a few months back, I was using this gauge pack without the speed cable and without the external temperature sensor, and it never once flashed to let me know that the compass was out of, or the compass sensor was calibrated incorrectly. So now back to the regular video.
Yeah, so up here. So, and I'm sorry for the sort of zoomed in shot. This camera only has a single, what is that, field of view? And the instructions that you can find on a lot of forums, there's a scanned PDF. They actually don't give you very much detail, but I hope to show you what you actually want. And this is the 99 Impreza, like I said, but there's actually this blue, very large, I think it's 24 pin connector. You want this blue connector, and you need to tap into it. So you can see that So I actually use, right there, focus. You can actually see the sort of white crud on there. I use super glue to keep this blue cable in here. I'm a big guy. I found this very difficult to do, to sort of wedge myself underneath here. You can see, looking at it flat on from entering the driver's area, that's what you have to get into, and I've actually pulled it down a bit. So yeah, you have to sort of yank this out, wiggle it into place, and then tap into this wire. Now, it's wire number 9 in that connector. I really wish this would focus. So it's wire number 9, which is, there's 6 cables. So on the top row of the 24 pin, there's a 6 side and then there's a 5 side, 5 cables. You want the one from the 5 side that's going into number 9. So it's the middle of the 5 side, and you'll sort of understand if you looked at a few pictures of this, but I'm sorry, that's the best description I can give you. So that's for speed sense, and I'm thank God I'm done with that, because that was such a pain in the ass. Of course, since you're doing a thermocouple, you need to actually, that's in the engine bay or in front of the engine bay, you need to have access through the firewall. So I've done that there. So here's that rubber bung thing that goes in there. This is just, I mean, I think there's multiple holes in the firewall, but I'm just going to use this one. And I think it's the one that they recommend in the sort of installation manual that you can get from those forums. It says LH on it. Don't know what that means for this one. I'm sorry for the crappy video. It's hard enough to focus on my hands while also trying to focus the camera. So you can see the sort of crappy job I did. The thermocouple that I got with my gauge pack was a little bit crunched up. I wish this would... There you go. So you can see that this is sort of cracked up. The actual housing, you can just look. You can just see that I use zip ties. I drilled a hole in the back of this plastic thing to make it go in there, and I'm routing the wire to try to keep it. There are a couple of breaks in the wire because obviously it was used in a car before mine from eBay. So I did it as good of a job as I could do sealing the cable. I didn't use any sort of sealant, but I basically just use heat shrink, and I'm trying to keep it underneath these metal parts of the frame, or you know, this extension from the frame or whatever. I'm trying to run it underneath, and I've got it coming out from under here. I'm going to do some more zip ties. This is where I stopped. I'm going to continue zip tying it. They do in the instructions actually just say use zip ties or tie something, as I'm not entirely sure what they called them. But this is long enough where you can get it out to the end of here, and then I'm going to get it through the hole down there by cutting a hole in that firewall hole thingy, and that is more or less what I'm gonna have to do. I might actually use a smaller one. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, see, that's pretty much the installation process, or the difficult parts of the installation process that are not well documented online. The gauge pack initially came, or was supposed to be installed with this sort of pod thing that sticks out of the dash, and it replaces this storage thing. It actually sticks up a little bit. You can see people that have modded like the STI or the WRX versions of this car with sort of like an actual gauges pack for like engine stats, oil pressure, temperature, that kind of stuff, turbo, blah, blah, blah. They actually have like a 3-dial one of these. It's not compatible with the actual gauge pack. There's the original one that came with, and I need to do a few runs to a junkyard or something, because I know a lot of Foresters came with them, but I don't know that I'm going to have any luck finding the right sort of pod piece that matches the internal colors. And I've sort of got like a tan, dark tan with lighter tan interior, and I don't think I'm going to find any that are going to match this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick it underneath where the little storage tray was, underneath the stereo, and I think I'm just going to call it good. So I took that LH bung thing, I have no better word for it, and I cut a hole along the bottom of it that was wide enough to push the end of that connector through, and then I used some... Now, hopefully this isn't the wrong stuff to use, but I used some DAP weldwood just because I happen to have some left over from the speaker project. So I used some of that, just sort of smeared it all over there and inside the gap. Down there you can see the sort of space where it came through. Right there, unfortunately the camera's having trouble focusing, but yep, it went there. There's that blue 24-pin connector that you had to hack in. I'm going to just sort of zip tie as much of this up just so it's sort of tidy and not going to wiggle too much. I'm going to find a better route for this cable to go, which is going behind a support beam that holds up the sort of center console and directly behind the stereo. So the hard work's done. I've tapped into that connector, the blue connector there. I have finished getting that through, and that was a big stumbling block that I that's been keeping me back from finishing this project there. So I think that's all I'm going to film, and hopefully that information helped you out if you are doing that installation. And obviously not very many people are going to watch this video, or if you are, hopefully it wasn't too rambling and mad, but yeah, that's how I get when I work on my car. Alright, thank you very much for watching.